5 men in $1,000 suits sat behind glass walls, laughing at a girl in jeans. To them, she was nobody. Just a joke. Someone who clearly didn't belong in that room. They didn't know she'd walked in soaked from the rain. After her car broke down on the side of the road. On the worst night of her life. They mocked her clothes. They smirked at her silence. They thought power was loud, and that they had all of it. What they didn't know was that in less than 30 seconds, the laughter would stop. All it took was one sentence. One document slid across the table, and one name at the bottom of a legal page. A name that didn't ask for permission. A name that flipped the room. A name that turned 5 powerful men into 5 very quiet ones. Because the girl they laughed at wasn't lost. She wasn't weak. She was the consequence. And what began as a flat tire in the rain ended as the most expensive mistake of their lives. The boardroom was everything you'd expect from a billion-dollar empire. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. A table so polished you could see your reflection in it. Leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's cars. And sitting in those chairs were 5 men who looked like they owned the world. Tailored suits. Expensive watches. The kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. At the head of that table sat Richard Harlan. Self-made millionaire. The right-hand man who'd climbed his way to the top of Harlan Industries through sheer determination, long hours, and, let's be honest, a willingness to do whatever it took. He was the guy who made the tough calls. The one who cut costs, even when those costs had names and families. To Richard, business was business. Numbers on a spreadsheet. Nothing personal. That afternoon, the air in that room was thick with anticipation. They were waiting for the reading of the will. Elias Harlan, the legendary founder of Harlan Industries, had passed away 2 weeks earlier, and everyone knew what was coming. Or at least they thought they did. Richard had already mentally divided up the power. He'd even prepared a speech about his vision for the company's future. More efficiency, higher profits, fewer dead weights dragging them down. Then the door opened, and in walked a girl who looked like she'd wandered in from a college campus. Maybe 22, 23 years old. Jeans that had seen better days. A simple white t-shirt. Sneakers that were clean but worn. Her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that swung as she walked. She carried a leather folder under one arm, and in her eyes, those deep brown eyes, there was something these men didn't recognize at first. Determination. She stopped at the edge of that massive table, looking at each of them in turn. Then she spoke, her voice clear but with just the slightest tremor that betrayed her nerves. "Sir," she said, nodding toward Richard. "I'm the new owner." For a moment, nobody moved. Then someone snorted. Then another executive chuckled. And then the whole room erupted in laughter. Richard nearly spit out his coffee. He set down his mug and leaned back in his chair, a huge grin spreading across his face. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is a billion-dollar company, not a lemonade stand. Who put you up to this? Is this some kind of prank show? Are there cameras?" The other men joined in, slapping the table, wiping their eyes. One of them, a VP named Marcus, couldn't catch his breath. "Oh man, Richard, did you hire her for entertainment? That's brilliant." But the girl didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. She just stood there, waiting for them to finish. And when the laughter finally died down to scattered chuckles, she stepped forward and slid the leather folder across that polished table. "Read it," she said simply. Richard was still grinning as he picked up the document. He figured he'd humor her, read whatever fake paperwork someone had cooked up, maybe even give her $20 for her trouble. But as his eyes scanned the first page, that grin started to fade. By the second page, his hand was shaking. And when he reached the signature at the bottom, that bold, unmistakable signature he'd seen on hundreds of contracts over the years, all the color drained from his face. The room went completely silent. This can't be," Richard whispered. But it was. Right there in black and white, verified by the best law firm in New York, was the last will and testament of Elias Harlan. And it left controlling interest in Harlan Industries to one Mia Rodriguez. The girl standing in front of them. Marcus grabbed the document from Richard's hands, his eyes going wide. Another executive pulled out his phone, already calling their lawyers. But deep down they all knew. This was real. The girl, Mia, pulled out a chair and sat down. Not at the head of the table, not yet. Just somewhere in the middle, like she was joining a conversation rather than taking over an empire. "I know you have questions," she said quietly. "And I know this seems impossible. Honestly, 2 weeks ago, It seemed impossible to me too. But before we go any further, before we talk about what happens next, I need to tell you a story. Because the only way any of this makes sense is if you understand where it all started. Richard looked like he might be sick, but he nodded slowly. I'm listening. Mia took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, more distant, like she was watching a memory play out in her mind. It was about 7 years ago. The rain came down in sheets that afternoon, the kind of downpour that turns streets into rivers and makes you question every decision that led you to being outside. It was a Tuesday in late September, and Mia Rodriguez was walking home from school, her backpack heavy with textbooks and her umbrella fighting a losing battle against the wind. She was 17 then, a senior at the public high school in a neighborhood that real estate agents politely called up and coming. What that really meant was blue-collar families doing their best, corner stores with bars on the windows, and dreams that had to work around reality. Mia's dad worked at a factory. Her mom pulled double shifts as a nurse at the county hospital. They didn't have much, but what they did have, they shared. That's how Mia was raised. To see people who needed help and to help them. Simple as that. So when she spotted the old man on the side of the road, struggling with a flat tire in the pouring rain, she didn't even think twice. She just walked over. The man was old, had to be in his 70s at least. He wore an expensive-looking coat that was now soaked through, and he was trying to work a jack under a vintage Cadillac that probably belonged in a museum. But his hands were shaking, and every time he bent down, he'd wince like his back was about to give out. Cars zoomed past, splashing water. Nobody stopped. Nobody even slowed down. "Excuse me, sir?" Mia called out over the rain. "Do you need some help?" The old man looked up, surprised. His face was weathered, lined with decades of hard decisions and harder losses. His eyes were sharp, though, even through the rain. "I've got it," he grumbled, pride keeping his voice steady even as his body betrayed him. But Mia could see he didn't have it. She knelt down in the mud beside him, holding her umbrella over both of them with one hand. "My dad taught me how to do this last summer," she said with a warm smile. "He said every person should know how to change a tire, fix a leaky faucet, and cook at least one good meal. I've got this, sir." "Really?" The old man, Elias Harland, though Mia had no idea who he was, wanted to argue. He'd built an empire by never accepting help, by being tougher and smarter than everyone else. But the arthritis in his hands was flaring up something fierce, and this girl had kind eyes. So he let her help. For the next 20 minutes, Mia worked on that tire while making conversation to fill the awkward silence. She talked about school, about how she was hoping to get into community college because that's what her family could afford. She talked about her volunteer work at the local shelter, helping serve meals on weekends. She talked about her dreams, simple dreams, really. Get an education. Help people. Make her parents proud. She didn't know she was talking to one of the richest men in America. To her, he was just an old guy who needed help on a rainy day. When the spare tire was finally on and the jack was packed away, Elias pulled out his wallet. "Let me pay you," he said. "For your time. For ruining your clothes." Mia looked down at her mud-stained jeans and laughed. "These were already ruined, sir. And you don't owe me anything. My mama always says kindness isn't something you sell. It's something you give." Elias stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He smiled. A real smile, not the thin corporate smile he'd perfected for board meetings. "What's your name, young lady?" "Mia Rodriguez, sir." "Well, Mia Rodriguez, thank you." "Truly." Mia pulled a slightly soggy piece of paper from her pocket, a habit she'd picked up from her volunteer work. On it, she'd drawn a little sun with crayons, her way of brightening someone's day. She handed it to him. "Pay it forward, that's all I ask. When you get the chance to help someone, do it." And then she was gone, jogging through the rain toward home, her umbrella bouncing with each step. Elias stood there in the rain, holding that soggy drawing, something shifting deep in his chest. For decades, he'd surrounded himself with people who wanted something from him. Money, power, access. But this girl? She'd wanted nothing. She'd just helped because that's who she was. He got back in his Cadillac, tucking the drawing carefully into his coat pocket, and drove back to his penthouse overlooking Central Park. Back to his world of marble floors and original artwork and silence, so complete you could hear your own heartbeat. That night, he kept thinking about Mia. About her smile. About her simple dreams. About the way she'd said kindness isn't something you sell. The years that followed moved like they always do. Fast for some, slow for others, but always forward. For Mia, those years were hard work and small victories. She got into community college like she'd hoped, taking classes during the day and working 2 jobs at night. One at a diner, one at an auto repair shop her dad's friend owned. She learned to change oil, fix transmissions, rotate tires. She was good with her hands and better with people. After graduation, she started a tiny nonprofit with money she'd saved up and a small grant from the city. It wasn't much, just a garage where she taught underprivileged kids basic trade skills. How to fix cars, how to do basic carpentry, how to wire a lamp. Skills that could turn into jobs. Skills that could change lives. She called it Pay It Forward Auto. And every kid who graduated got a little drawing of a son. For Richard Harlan, those years were a different kind of climb. He rose through the ranks at Harlan Industries like a man possessed. He worked 16-hour days. He made the tough calls that other executives wouldn't make. When the company needed to cut costs, Richard was the one who drew up the layoff lists. When workers complained about safety conditions, Richard was the one who explained that regulations cost money and money was everything. He became Elias Harlan's right-hand man, the executor, the hammer that came down when the old man was too tired to swing it himself. But Elias was watching. And as the years passed, as his health began to fail and his body began to betray him, he watched more carefully. He watched Richard fire single mothers with sick kids because the numbers said it made sense. He watched the fear that crept into the eyes of longtime employees. He watched the soul of his company, the thing he'd built with sweat and sacrifice, slowly drain away in the name of efficiency. And he thought about Mia. Often. He'd kept that soggy drawing in his desk drawer. Sometimes, late at night when the insomnia was bad, he'd take it out and look at it. He'd started an anonymous scholarship fund in her name. He had his people investigate her quietly, not in a creepy way, just checking in. Making sure she was okay. Making sure the world hadn't crushed that spark he'd seen in the rain. When he learned about her nonprofit, about the kids she was helping, about the way she was building something real with almost nothing, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Hope. The world was full of Richard Harlans. Ambitious. Smart. Ruthless. They were a dime a dozen. But Mia Rodriguez? She was rare. She was what the world needed more of. So one night, 3 months before his death, Elias Harlan called his personal attorney to his penthouse. And he rewrote his will. He left generous donations to charities. He left his art collection to museums. He left his penthouse to be converted into housing for homeless veterans. But Harlan Industries? The company he'd spent 50 years building? That went to Mia Rodriguez, the girl who'd changed his tire in the rain and asked for nothing in return except kindness. He wrote a private letter explaining his decision, sealed it, and instructed his attorney to give it to Mia when the time came. In a world full of takers, he wrote in his shaky handwriting, she was a giver. Let her lead with heart. Let her show them what I forgot along the way. That business is about people, not just profits. She'll do better than I ever did. I'm certain of it. 3 months later, Elias Harlan died peacefully in his sleep. And the shockwaves began. When Mia finished telling the story of that rainy afternoon, the boardroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Richard Harlan sat frozen, his hands still gripping the edges of the will like it might disappear if he let go. The other executives looked at each other, uncertain. This wasn't how these things were supposed to go. Marcus, the VP who'd been laughing the hardest just minutes ago, cleared his throat. So, you changed a tire. And he gave you $1 billion company. Mia met his eyes, and there was no anger there. Just a quiet sadness. He didn't give it to me because I changed a tire, sir. He gave it to me because of what that moment represented. Because in his whole life, surrounded by people who wanted things from him, I was someone who wanted nothing. And I think he spent the last years of his life watching what this company had become. Watching people get hurt in the name of profit. And he decided to bet on something different. She pulled out another document from her folder. A letter, handwritten, the ink slightly faded. His attorney gave me this. He wrote it 3 months before he died. Do you want to hear what he said? Nobody spoke, but they all nodded. Mia's voice wavered slightly as she read. To Mia Rodriguez. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And you're probably confused as hell. Maybe even angry. I'm sorry to put this burden on you, but I watched you for 7 years, and I know you can handle it. You asked me that day to pay it forward. Well, this is how I'm doing it. This company forgot what it was supposed to be about. It forgot that behind every number on a spreadsheet is a human being with a family, with dreams, with dignity. You never forgot that. You saw an old man struggling in the rain, and you helped. No cameras, no witnesses, no reward, just because it was the right thing to do. Lead them the way you would have wanted to be led. Show them that profit and compassion aren't enemies. They're partners. I believe in you. I always did. From that first day. Elias. Richard's hand went to his face. For a moment, everyone thought he might be crying, but when he looked up, his eyes were dry. Just empty. Like he was seeing himself clearly for the first time in years, and didn't like what he found. I fired 300 people last year, he said quietly, to increase quarterly earnings by 2%. 300 families. And I went home and slept just fine. I know, Mia said softly. I read the reports. One of them. Richard's voice cracked. One of them wrote me a letter. Said his daughter was sick. Needed medication. Begged for his job back. I had my assistant send a form rejection. The room felt heavy with the weight of regret. Mia stood up and walked around the table until she was standing beside Richard. She put a hand on his shoulder, and he flinched like he didn't deserve the kindness. I'm not here to punish anyone, she said. I'm not here to point fingers or make you feel guilty. What's done is done. But what happens next? That's up to all of us. She looked around the room, meeting each man's eyes. Here's what I'm proposing. We're going to change how this company operates. We're going to reinstate the workers who were laid off unfairly. The ones who wanted to work, who needed to work, but were cut to make the numbers look good. We're going to invest in safety, in training, in programs that help our employees build real careers, not just jobs. We're going to partner with communities, create apprenticeships, fund education. That'll cost millions, Marcus said, but his voice wasn't argumentative anymore. Just calculating. In the short term, yes, Mia agreed. But in the long term, we'll have loyal employees who actually care about the company. We'll have communities that support us instead of protesting us. We'll have innovation because people aren't scared to suggest new ideas. Mr. Harlan built this company on hard work and vision, not on fear. We're going back to that. She returned to her seat and pulled out a business plan she'd spent the last 2 weeks working on with the attorney, barely sleeping, learning everything she could about the company. I'm not a businesswoman. Not yet. But I'm a fast learner and I know people. So here's what I need from all of you. I need honesty. I need your expertise. And I need you to decide right now whether you want to be part of this new direction or not. Because if you can't get on board with putting people first, then this isn't going to work. The executives exchanged glances. One by one, most of them nodded. They'd been in this game long enough to know when the tide was turning. And something about this young woman with the ponytail and the sun drawings made them want to believe. Made them remember why they'd gotten into business in the first place, before the corner offices and the stock options had changed them. But Richard stood up slowly. He looked older somehow, like the weight of the last hour had added years to his face. I can't do it, he said. Mia tilted her head. Can't do what? I can't stay. I can't be part of this. He looked down at his hands, those hands that had signed so many termination letters. You're right, about all of it, but I'm not the man who can help you build what you're describing. I'm the guy who tears things down to make them profitable. That's all I know. That's not all you know, Mia said gently. You worked your way up from nothing, didn't you? I read your file too. You started in the mailroom. You put yourself through night school. You know what it's like to struggle. Richard smiled sadly. I did. But somewhere along the way, I forgot. Or maybe I just stopped caring. I became the kind of boss I used to hate. He picked up his briefcase, and for the first time since Mia had met him, he looked at peace. I'm going to resign. Start something new. Something smaller. And I'm going to try to remember what you said about kindness. Maybe it's not too late for me to pay it forward too. He extended his hand and Mia shook it. It's never too late, she said. And Richard, thank you for being honest. He nodded and walked out of that boardroom, his $1,000 shoes echoing on the marble floor. The other executives watched him go, and then they turned back to Mia. So, Marcus said, and now there was a slight smile on his face. When do we start? The months that followed were a whirlwind. Mia moved into the office, not Elias's old corner office with the panoramic views, but a smaller one on the floor where the design team worked. She wanted to be in the middle of things, not above them. She spent her first week just walking around, talking to employees at every level. The janitors. the assembly line workers, the middle managers who'd been drowning in bureaucracy. She listened, really listened, and then she started making changes. The laid-off workers were contacted first. Not all of them wanted to come back. Some had found new jobs, moved on, built different lives. But many did. And when they returned, they found a company that looked similar on the outside, but felt completely different on the inside. Safety equipment was upgraded. Training programs were expanded. A daycare center was built on the first floor, so parents didn't have to choose between work and family. Profit-sharing programs were introduced. Mental health resources were made available. But the biggest change, the culture. Mia instituted something she called Sun Fridays. Once a month, the entire company would shut down normal operations for an afternoon, and employees would go out into the community to volunteer. Build houses with Habitat for Humanity. Serve meals at shelters. Teach kids at local schools. And every person who participated got a little card with a sun drawn on it and the words, "Pay it forward." The board of directors, the ones who weren't day-to-day executives, fought her at first. Old men with old ideas about how business should work. They threatened lawsuits, threatened to tank the stock price, threatened everything they could think of. But Mia held firm. And something remarkable happened. The stock price didn't crash. It soared. Turns out, when employees feel valued, they work harder. When communities feel supported, they become customers. When a company stands for something beyond profit, people want to be part of it. The media picked up the story. The girl who inherited a billion-dollar company and used it to change the world. Orders flooded in. Partnerships formed. Other companies started copying the model. Within a year, Harland Industries was more profitable than it had ever been under Richard's cost-cutting regime. But more importantly, it was respected. Loved even. Mia's nonprofit, Pay It Forward Auto, merged with the company's community outreach program. The garage expanded into a full training center. Thousands of young people cycled through, learning trades, finding jobs, building futures. Some of them stayed with Harland Industries. Others went on to start their own businesses. But all of them carried forward that same message. Kindness isn't weakness. It's strength. 2 years after that day in the boardroom, Mia stood at a podium in that same building, addressing a room full of employees, journalists, and business leaders. It was the annual company meeting, but it felt more like a family reunion. She wore a dress now. She'd learned that sometimes you had to play the part, but she'd kept her old sneakers on underneath. Some things don't change. 2 years ago, she said, her voice clear and confident in a way it hadn't been that first day. I walked into a room full of men who thought I was a joke. And honestly, I don't blame them. I was terrified. I had no idea what I was doing. But I had something they didn't. I had a memory of a man in the rain who saw something in me I didn't even see in myself. And I had a promise I'd made, to pay it forward. She gestured to the crowd. Every person in this room has paid it forward in some way. You've mentored someone. You've helped a colleague. You've volunteered in the community. You've chosen compassion over convenience. And look what we've built together. Not just a profitable company. A movement. The room erupted in applause. When it died down, Mia continued. Mr. Harland wrote in his letter that he believed in me. But the truth is, this was never about me. It was about all of us remembering something we'd forgotten. That we're human beings first and employees second. That success isn't measured just in dollars, but in lives changed. In communities lifted up. In kindness multiplied. She pulled out a familiar piece of paper, now laminated and preserved. The original sun drawing from that rainy day. This was the first one I ever made. And Mr. Harland kept it in his desk for 7 years. It reminded him that even in the darkest storm, there's light if you look for it. If you create it. She held it up for everyone to see. So I'm challenging all of you. When you leave here today, find someone who needs help. A stranger. A colleague. A neighbor. And help them. Not because you'll get something out of it. Not because someone's watching. But because it's what we do. It's who we are. We're the people who stop in the rain. Who change the tire. Who share the umbrella. More applause. But this time, people were standing. Not just clapping, but cheering. Some were crying. Because Mia had put into words what they'd all been feeling. That work could be about more than a paycheck. That business could be a force for good. After the meeting, as people filtered out talking excitedly about new initiatives and projects, a man approached Mia. He was in his 40s, wearing a nice suit but with the weathered hands of someone who'd done manual labor for years. Ms. Rodriguez, he said nervously. I don't know if you remember me. My name is David Chen. You reinstated me 2 years ago after I was laid off. Mia smiled warmly. I remember. You worked in quality control, right? You'd been with the company for 15 years. David's eyes widened. You remember that? I remember everyone who came back, Mia said simply. How are things going? Good. Really good. He pulled out his phone and showed her a picture of a teenage girl in a graduation gown. This is my daughter, Sarah. The one I wrote to Mr. Harlan about. She was sick back then, needed expensive medication. When I lost my job, I thought. His voice broke. I thought we were going to lose her. But you didn't, Mia said softly. No, because you brought me back. And the new health insurance covered everything. She just graduated high school, Ms. Rodriguez. With honors. She wants to be a nurse. And it's because of you. Mia shook her head. It's because of her. Because she fought. And because of you, for never giving up on her. She paused. But I'm glad we could help. David wiped his eyes. I just wanted to say thank you. And to tell you that I volunteer now. At the children's hospital where Sarah was treated. Every weekend. Teaching kids art therapy. It's my way of paying it forward. Mia felt her own eyes getting misty. That's beautiful, David. Really? He nodded and turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and Ms. Rodriguez? Sarah made you something. To say thank you. He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a drawing. A sun. Bright and yellow and full of hope. Mia held it carefully. That same feeling washing over her that she did 7 years ago in the rain. The feeling that she was part of something bigger than herself. Something that would ripple outward long after she was gone. That night, Mia stood alone in her office, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Richard Harlan was running his own small consulting firm, helping startups build ethical businesses. He'd sent her an email a few months back with just 2 words. Thank you. Somewhere out there, thousands of kids were learning trades, finding hope, discovering that their circumstances didn't define their futures. Somewhere out there, families were staying together because parents had good jobs with fair wages and healthcare that worked. And it all traced back to one moment. One choice. One girl who stopped to help an old man in the rain. Mia pulled out her phone and looked at a photo she'd taken earlier that day. The crowd at the meeting, standing and cheering. In the front row, she could see David Chen, wiping tears from his eyes. Beside him, an employee she'd promoted from the factory floor to management. Next to them, a young woman who'd come through the training program and now ran her own auto shop. The ripples. That's what Elias had understood at the end. That kindness doesn't disappear. It multiplies. It echoes. One small act becomes 2, becomes 10, becomes 1,000. Until you can't even track where it all started or where it will end. Mia's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, the VP who'd laughed at her that first day. Now he was one of her strongest allies. The message read, just heard from the mayor. They want to replicate our community program citywide. You did it, boss. She smiled and typed back. We did it. Because that was the truth. This was never about one person. It was about all of them choosing to be better. To do better. She turned off her office light and headed home to the modest apartment she'd kept despite being able to afford a mansion. She passed the night security guard, a man she'd hired after learning he was a veteran struggling to find work, and wished him a good evening. You too, Ms. Rodriguez, he said with a genuine smile. Hey, my kid wanted me to give you this. He handed her a piece of paper. Another sun drawing. Mia laughed. Tell your kid I love it. And tell them to keep spreading that light. Will do, ma'am. Will do. As Mia walked out into the New York night, past the homeless man she always stopped to talk to, past the street performer she always tipped, past the late-night diner where she still knew all the waitresses by name, she thought about that rainy day 7 years ago. She thought about how scared she'd been. How young. How naive. She thought about Elias Harlan and how one person's faith in her had changed everything. And she thought about all the people who would never know the whole story, who would never connect their changed circumstances back to that moment in the rain. But that was okay. That was the whole point. Kindness doesn't need recognition. It doesn't need applause or awards or news coverage. It just needs to be done. Over and over and over again. Until the rain stops. Until the storms pass. Until the world is a little bit brighter than it was before. One tire change at a time. One helping hand at a time. One small act of compassion that echoes through eternity. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, Mia liked to imagine that Elias Harland was watching and smiling, and knowing that his final act, his greatest investment, had paid off in ways the stock market could never measure. Because in the end, that's what matters. Not the money we make or the titles we hold or the corner offices we occupy, but the lives we touch, the people we help, the kindness we create, and the world we leave behind, a little bit better, a little bit brighter than we found it. That's the inheritance that truly lasts. That's the legacy worth building. That's the power of a girl in the rain who saw someone struggling and decided to stop. Just to stop and help. End of chapter 2. Closing reflection. So what's your rainy day moment going to be? Maybe you won't inherit a billion-dollar company. Maybe no one will write articles about you or give you awards. But that's not why we do it, is it? We do it because somewhere, right now, someone is struggling with their own flat tire. And they need someone to stop, to see them, to help. Be that someone. Pay it forward. And watch how one small act can change everything. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment below about a time someone helped you when you needed it most, or a time you helped someone else. Let's keep the ripple going, because the world needs more MIAs, more people who stop in the rain. And maybe, just maybe, that person is you. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep spreading that light.